Who let this woman in here? A row of lawyers sat around the conference table with their pens ready. Across from them, Chief Executive Vivian Hartwell held a pen above the contract. A black cleaning woman in a grey uniform walked straight toward Vivian, reached across the table and pulled the agreement away before the signature could touch the page. They're lying. The room exploded. Put that down. Get her out of here. Go back to cleaning. That's all people like you are good for. Nia Holloway didn't flinch. She opened the contract to the hidden transfer clause and laid her finger on the language that mattered. There's a shell company buried in this agreement, and his name is behind it. If you sign this, you lose everything you built. One by one, the lawyers around the table went pale. Gideon Vale opened his mouth, but came out. He knew her. He remembered exactly who she was, and what Nia revealed next would do far more than stop one contract. It would expose a secret powerful enough to destroy careers, reopen an old injustice, and change every person in that room. Years earlier, before Nia Holloway ever walked into that boardroom wearing a cleaning uniform, she had been one of the most promising young corporate attorneys in New York City. She had graduated near the top of her class from Columbia Law and earned a place at Prescott & Rowe, a prestigious firm where senior partners drove cars worth more than many families' homes. Nia was the only black woman working on the litigation floor, and she understood from the beginning that no one was going to hand her anything. She hadn't grown up with money. She had grown up in a small apartment in Flatbush with her mother, Dorothy Holloway, a hotel housekeeper who worked nearly every day she could, so her daughter could spend nearly every day studying. Dorothy never missed a tuition payment. Even when her knees swelled and every step hurt, she put on her uniform, went to work, cleaned room after room, smiled at strangers, came home exhausted, and got up to do it all again. When Nia passed the bar exam, Dorothy handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a black and gold Mont Blanc pen. "I've been saving for this since you were a girl," Dorothy told her. "I wanted you to have a pen worthy of the day you sign something that truly matters." Nia carried that pen with her everywhere. At Prescott & Rowe, she worked harder than anyone around her. She arrived before most of the office and stayed after nearly everyone had left. She took on contracts that senior associates avoided because they were too long, too dense, and packed with clauses buried inside clauses. Nia had a rare gift. She could sit with hundreds of pages of legal language until every sentence, every definition, and every comma made sense. She noticed what other people rushed past. That gift was also what placed her in danger. During a major merger review, Nia found a pattern of transactions moving through several shell companies registered in Delaware. The money trail kept circling back to one man, Gideon Vale, senior partner at Vale Legal, one of Prescott & Rowe's most powerful clients. His business brought the firm tens of millions of dollars in annual billings, and beneath the polished paperwork, Nia found $12 million siphoned from client trust accounts and hidden behind layers of corporate filings designed to make sure nobody looked twice. Nia looked twice. She printed every document she could support. She highlighted each discrepancy, organized the transfers, traced the ownership structures, and carried everything into the office of managing partner Blaine Prescott. He listened carefully, nodded at the right moments, thanked her for being thorough, and told her he would take it from there. Soon after, Nia's office keycard stopped working. A disciplinary complaint arrived almost immediately. It had been filed by Vale Legal. The complaint accused Nia of fabricating client documents, forging signatures, and misrepresenting billing records. Several employees from Gideon Vale's firm submitted sworn statements claiming they had personally witnessed evidence of her misconduct. The case against her looked airtight because Gideon Vale had built it that way. Nia faced the disciplinary board alone. She couldn't afford the kind of attorney needed to challenge a firm with Vale's resources. Prescott & Rowe offered no support. Blaine Prescott stopped returning her calls. "The evidence is overwhelming," she was told. "It's fabricated," Nia said. "All of it. Check the metadata, check the original file history. Look at when those records were created and who changed them. We've reviewed what we need to review." Her law license was revoked. News moved through the legal community before Nia could even understand what had happened. People whispered that she'd been caught forging documents. Others said they had always known she was in over her head. Some reduced everything she had earned to a cynical remark about diversity hiring. Nobody checked the metadata. Nobody asked why a young associate with a clean record would suddenly risk her entire career by falsifying billing records for a client she barely dealt with. Nobody asked because asking would have meant challenging Gideon Vale. I was powerful. The truth was expensive. Nia lost her apartment after her savings disappeared. Every law firm she contacted knew about the disciplinary action. She applied for retail work, administrative positions, anything that would pay rent. Background checks followed her everywhere, license revoked, professional misconduct, untrustworthy. Then Dorothy became seriously ill. The diagnosis was stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Nia sat in a hospital hallway and listened as doctors explained that the treatment her mother needed would cost more than Nia could imagine earning without her career. Dorothy spent the final stretch of her life in a crowded public hospital ward behind thin curtains while machines sounded through the night. Nia sat beside her whenever she wasn't working, whatever job she could find. Day labor, cleaning offices, cash jobs that didn't ask questions. "Baby, stop worrying about me," Dorothy told her. "Mama, I'm going to fix this. You already fixed everything. You became everything I prayed for." Dorothy Holloway died with Nia holding her hand. In Nia's pocket was the Mont Blanc pen, the only valuable thing she had refused to sell. After the funeral, Nia applied for a night cleaning job at Hartwell and Sterling. The building stood only a few blocks from the office where she'd once practiced law. From the loading dock, she could see the windows of the place where her career had ended. She told herself she took the job because it paid $12 an hour and didn't require the kind of background check that had closed every other door. That was only half the truth. The other half was harder to admit. Whenever Nia finished mopping the executive boardroom, she would sit alone in the empty conference room and read whatever legal documents had been left behind. Contracts, briefs, depositions, merger agreements. She wasn't planning revenge. She wasn't building a scheme. She read because the law was still the only place where she felt like herself. It was the place where rules were supposed to mean something, where facts could be tested, where a single misplaced comma could change the meaning of an entire agreement. For years, Nia cleaned floors and studied contracts in the dark. Nobody noticed. Most people barely looked at the cleaning woman long enough to remember her face. Then, the boardroom doors opened, and a group of men in expensive suits walked in. At the head of the table sat Gideon Vale. He was older and grayer, but he wore the same calm smile, the same polished confidence, and then the same certainty that nobody around him was smart enough or brave enough to catch what he was doing. Nia was emptying a trash can by the window. Gideon glanced at her for barely a moment, then looked straight through her as if she were part of the furniture. Nia said nothing. She finished emptying the trash, wiped down the side table, pushed her cleaning cart into the hallway, and stopped with her back against the wall. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Gideon Vale was in this building with a table full of lawyers. Nia knew what that meant. She had seen this formation before, the matching suits, the leather briefcases, the relaxed confidence. It was a Vale acquisition play. The same playbook he had used for years: arrive with overwhelming legal firepower, bury the real terms beneath hundreds of pages of technical language, and leave with control of everything that mattered. After the meeting ended and the lawyers were gone, Nia returned to the boardroom. The draft agreement was still on the table. It was more than 200 pages long, a merger contract for Hartwell and Sterling prepared by Vale Legal. Nia sat in Vivian Hartwell's chair, pulled the document toward her, and began reading the way she used to read at Prescott and Rowe, page by page, clause by clause. Her finger followed each line. Her lips moved silently over every word. The opening sections looked clean. Standard merger language, representations and warranties, indemnification, familiar boilerplate. Then the language changed. Buried inside a definition section was a subclause describing proprietary intellectual assets, so broadly that it covered far more than patents and trademarks. It included internal processes, algorithms, methods, technical systems, and even institutional knowledge Hartwell and Sterling had developed over decades. Nia's finger stopped. She had seen the wording before, not something similar. The exact construction, the same legal architecture Gideon Vale had used in the trust account scheme Nia had uncovered at Prescott and Rowe, the same type of language that had started the chain of events that cost her career. Her hands began to shake. She kept reading, farther into the agreement. A transfer clause stated that all proprietary intellectual assets would move to a holding company called Pinnacle Ventures Limited Liability Company once the merger was completed. Nia pulled out her phone and checked the Delaware corporate registry. Pinnacle Ventures had been registered through a Wilmington law firm Vail had used in previous deals. The beneficial owner was not publicly listed. Nia didn't need the name. She knew the architecture. She had mapped it once before, and doing so had cost her almost everything. Another buried clause eliminated the founder's irrevocable veto rights under the language of a post-merger governance transition. If Vivian signed, she would lose the one power that allowed her to block board decisions that threatened the company's founding mission. Once that veto disappeared, people aligned with Vail could strip the company apart and sell the pieces. Nia stayed in the empty boardroom until she had read the entire contract twice. She photographed every critical page. She compared clause structures against what she remembered from the files that had once been used to destroy her. It was the same hand, the same mind, the same trick, wearing different clothes. By the time she finished, her phone held dozens of photographs, and her notes covered the backs of cleaning supply forms. Her hand ached, her eyes burned. She placed the agreement back exactly where she'd found it, walked into the supply closet, sat on an overturned bucket, and cried. Not because she was sad, because she was terrified. The last time she had tried to expose Gideon Vail, he had taken her career, her reputation, her security, and indirectly everything she had hoped to provide for her mother. Now, Nia was sitting beside a mop and a shelf of cleaning chemicals, thinking about doing it again. She couldn't rest. She sat in her apartment, staring at the photographs on her phone, turning through the notes, replaying the numbers in her mind. She thought about Dorothy. She thought about the Mont Blanc pen in her coat pocket. She remembered the last words her mother had given her. "Yao became everything I prayed for." When the signing meeting arrived, Nia came in early. She mopped the hallway outside the boardroom. She cleaned the glass doors. She emptied every trash can on the executive floor. Then she waited. The lawyers began arriving one by one. One in dark suits, carrying polished briefcases. They passed Nia without seeing her. One man bumped her mop bucket with his shoe and never even looked back. Vivian Hartwell entered next. She was in her 70s, silver-haired, dignified, and visibly tired. She had helped build Hartwell and Sterling from a tiny office into a company worth more than $1 billion. Yet, on that morning, she looked like someone who had spent too long hearing every advisor in the room tell her that signing was the sensible thing to do. Gideon Vail took his seat at the head of the table. The contract was placed in front of Vivian. Someone offered her a pen. "Shall we begin?" Nia stood outside the glass doors with a mop in her hand and her heart in her throat, the Mont Blanc pen pressed against her chest from inside her uniform pocket. She watched Vivian reach for the signature line. Something inside Nia opened. Not broke down, opened. She pushed through the doors. Every head turned. Gideon's face tightened with disgust. "Who let her in here?" Nia walked past the lawyers. She didn't run. She didn't hesitate. She reached across the table, took the contract from beneath Vivian's hand, and held it against her chest. "They're lying, every one of them." The room erupted. "Put that down. Get her out. Go back to cleaning. Stay in your place." Nia opened the contract to the transfer clause and read it aloud. Not in legal jargon. In plain English. She reduced hundreds of pages of deception to a few sentences anyone could understand. "This agreement transfers every patent, every process, every idea, and nearly everything your company has created to a shell company controlled through his network." She looked directly at Gideon. "Han doesn't want to merge with your company, Ms. Hartwell. He wants to hollow it out and sell the pieces." The room went silent. One lawyer closed his briefcase, then another. Gideon stared at Nia. For the first time since her career had been destroyed, he truly looked at her. His face lost its color. "You," he whispered. Nia didn't blink. "Me." The boardroom emptied quickly. Lawyers packed their papers and filed out without a word. Gideon Vail was the last to leave. At the doorway, he turned and looked at Nia with the cold expression of a man staring at a safe he thought he had already cracked. He said nothing. Hein didn't need to. The look carried the message clearly. This isn't over. The door clicked shut. Nia stood in the boardroom, holding the agreement against her chest. Her hands trembled. Her breathing turned shallow. The force that had carried her through the confrontation drained out of her legs, and she gripped the edge of the table to stay steady. Vivian hadn't moved. She sat in her chair, with the unused pen still in her hand, studying Nia with an expression that wasn't anger and wasn't gratitude. It was something deeper. "Sit down," Vivian said. Nia didn't move. "Please, sit down." Nia pulled out a chair and sat. The contract remained pressed against her chest. Vivian watched her for a long moment, then opened a desk drawer and removed a thick manila folder, worn along the edges and marked with colored tabs. She placed it between them. "I know who you are, Nia." The words hit harder than any insult in the room had. "I've known for a long time." Nia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vivian opened the folder. Inside were copies of Nia's law school transcripts, her bar admission certificate, the disciplinary complaint, press clippings from the scandal at Prescott and Rowe, and a photograph of Nia accepting an award for pro bono legal work before her license was revoked. "When my human resources department sent me your cleaning application, your name was flagged during screening," Vivian said. "Most companies would have thrown the application away. I pulled your file instead." Nia stared down at the pages. Her old life was spread across polished wood in paper and ink. "Why?" she whispered. Vivian leaned back. "Because Gideon Vale has been circling my company for years, and every lawyer I've hired has told me his deals are clean. I needed someone who already knew they weren't." "You used me. I waited for you. That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." Vivian folded her hands. "Using you would have meant telling you what to look for, directing your choices, or controlling the result. I didn't do that. I gave you a cleaning job and access to a building. Everything else was you. The reading, the studying, the nights you sat in this boardroom teaching yourself corporate law all over again. Every page you read was your choice." Nia's jaw tightened. Anger still burned inside her. Vivian had known and said nothing. She had watched Nia mop floors, empty trash cans, clean restrooms, and work only a few steps away from a boardroom where Nia once belonged at the table. "You could have told me. And you would have run," Vivian said quietly. "You were terrified, Nia. I could see it. Whenever a lawyer walked past you in the hallway, you tensed. Whenever someone raised a voice during a phone call, you looked at the floor. You weren't ready. If I'd told you what I suspected about Vale, you might have panicked and disappeared. Then he would have won." Nia wanted to argue. She couldn't, because part of her knew Vivian was right. Silence settled over the room. "My husband built this company from a garage in Queens," Vivian said. "Wesley Hartwell had no degree and no connections. He sold electrical components from the back of a station wagon. Bankers laughed at him. Suppliers made him pay cash up front because they didn't trust a man with grease under his fingernails." Vivian turned toward the window. He never forgot what it felt like to be dismissed. He knew what it was like to walk into a room and have people look through you. He built this company around one rule: never become the person who made you feel small. Nia's hand slipped into her pocket and closed around the Mont Blanc pen. "Your mother cleaned hotel rooms," Vivian said softly. "Wesley's mother cleaned office buildings. I don't think that's a coincidence." Something shifted inside Nia's chest. Not the anger. Something beneath it. Something she had held in place with discipline, silence, and the refusal to let herself feel too much. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she gripped the pen until her knuckles hurt. Vivian opened another drawer and removed an even larger stack of files. Transaction records, internal Vale legal memoranda, banking statements, shell company registrations, years of evidence, carefully organized and methodically collected. "I've been building this for a long time," Vivian said, "but I'm not a lawyer. I can collect paper. I can't read it the way you can. I can't see the structure beneath it the way you do." She pushed the files toward Nia. "I'm not asking you to be my employee. I'm asking you to be my partner in this. Help me stop him. Not for me, for every person he's buried to get where he is." Nia looked at the files, then at Vivian, then at the contract still lying between them. "He'll come after us. I know. Hunter's money, connections, and influence over the press. He'll try to destroy everything. I know that too. And you still want to fight him." Vivian smiled for the first time. It was a tired smile. The smile of someone who had carried a heavy fight alone for too long. "My dear, I've been fighting him since before you walked through that door with a mop. Difference now is that I'm not fighting alone." Nia set the contract on the table. She pulled her mother's Mont Blanc pen from her pocket and placed it beside the files. "My mother gave me this pen when I passed the bar. She said it was for signing something important." Nia looked at Vivian. I think this is what she meant. Nia stayed in Vivian's private office and began reading. It was a room she had cleaned countless times, but had never been invited to use. Vivian brought her coffee, food, and eventually a blanket when Nia's eyes reddened and handwritten notes covered every open surface. Before leaving, Vivian stopped at the door. Nia? Thank you for walking into that boardroom. Nia looked up from a stack of bank records. Thank you for not throwing me out. Vivian smiled. Good night, Nia. Good night, Ms. Hartwell. Vivian. Call me Vivian. The door closed softly. Nia sat alone in the warm office light, surrounded by evidence and holding her mother's pen. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Nia contacted Darius Bennett, a young civil rights attorney who had been studying Vail Legal's pattern of targeting minority professionals. Darius had suspicions. He had theories. What he lacked was proof. Nia had proof. When Darius arrived at Hartwell and Sterling, Nia laid out the merger analysis, the shell company structure, and the connection to her own disbarment. He sat silently turning pages, slowly understanding what was in front of him. This is it, he finally said. This is the case I've been trying to build for years. Then let's build it together. Gideon Vale didn't wait. The machine began moving almost immediately. The first attack came through the press. A business publication ran a story accusing a disbarred attorney of infiltrating a major corporation and manipulating an elderly chief executive. The source was anonymous, but the details were precise. Nia's full name, her disciplinary record, her cleaning position at Hartwell and Sterling. The article portrayed her as bitter, unstable, and dangerous, a woman who had supposedly manipulated her way into the trust of a vulnerable executive. Other outlets repeated the story. Television commentators debated it. One legal analyst described the case as an outrageous example of corporate manipulation and mocked the idea that a cleaning woman could challenge elite lawyers. Soon Nia's face was everywhere. Someone found an old professional photograph from Prescott and Rowe where Nia looked young, polished, and hopeful. They placed it beside a grainy security image of her pushing a cleaning cart in a grey uniform. The comparison spread online. Comments poured in from strangers who had never met her. She lost her license for a reason. This is what happens when people go where they don't belong. A cleaning lady thinks she's a lawyer. People turned Nia's humiliation into entertainment. Her private life became public argument. Her apartment building address appeared in comment sections. A television host held up her disciplinary record and laughed about it on air. Nia stopped looking at her phone. It didn't matter. The damage was already moving faster than she could absorb. Her landlord called after someone contacted him and claimed his tenant was a known con artist involved in active litigation. He told Nia he wanted her gone. When she came home, she found the word liar spray painted across her apartment door in red. The paint was still wet, running down the wood in thin streaks. Nia stood in the hallway with her keys in her hand and stared at it. Then she unlocked the door, stepped inside and locked it behind her. She didn't call the police. She didn't take a picture. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and pressed her mother's pen against her chest. The next attack came through the courts. Vail Legal filed several lawsuits. One demanded $50 million in damages from Nia for defamation. Another accused Vivian Hartwell of conspiring with a known bad actor to sabotage a legitimate merger. A third sought to restrain Darius Bennett, claiming he had used improper litigation tactics by contacting former Vail Legal employees. $50 million against a woman earning $12 an hour. The message was obvious. This wasn't only about winning in court. It was about drowning them in legal fees, burying them beneath paperwork, and making the fight so costly and exhausting that they would quit before a judge ever heard the truth. Vail's team also sent cease and desist letters to every law firm Darius had contacted for support. Each letter was polite, professional, and threatening without ever sounding openly threatening. Not one of those firms returned his follow-up calls. Then Darius received a message through someone connected to his former firm. We've heard you've taken on a case against Vail Legal. We just want you to understand that certain clients can make future partnerships difficult. We'd hate to see a promising career become complicated over something like this. Darius ended the call, sat in his office for a while, then called Nia. They're putting pressure on me. How bad? Bad enough that my old firm found a way to threaten me without ever using the word threat. Nia was quiet. You can walk away, Darius, I'll understand. I'm not walking away. I just need you to know what we're facing. The next attack came inside Hartwell and Sterling itself. Several board members received private calls from people connected to Vale Legal. The conversations were careful and professional. They raised concerns about Vivian's judgment, her age, and whether a woman in her 70s was still fit to lead a billion-dollar company. They suggested she had become vulnerable to anyone with a painful story and a cleaning cart. Soon, an emergency motion reached the board. The proposal called for Vivian's removal as chief executive and for authorization of the merger she had refused to sign. The vote happened behind closed doors. Nia wasn't allowed inside. She sat in the same hallway she used to mop and listened to muffled voices through the wall. At one point someone shouted, then everything went quiet. When the voices returned, they were lower and more measured. The way people speak when they understand someone's career may be about to end. Vivian survived the vote by the narrowest possible margin. When she walked out of the boardroom, her back was straight and her face composed. She didn't speak until she and Nia were alone. That was close. Too close, Nia said. They'll try again. They'll keep pushing until the numbers change. Nia stared at the floor. The pattern felt painfully familiar. When Gideon Vale had destroyed her before, he had isolated her, poisoned her reputation, cut off her allies, and made it so costly to stand beside her that everyone walked away. Now he was doing it again. Only this time, he wasn't targeting Nia alone. He was targeting Vivian, Darius, and anyone who came close enough to help. Nia sat at Vivian's desk and wrote a short letter. No emotion, no explanation, only the facts. It was a resignation. She left it beneath the Mont Blanc pen. When Vivian found it, she read the letter, read it again, then called Nia into her office. What is this? It's the right thing to do. Everyone who stands beside me gets hurt. You nearly lost your company because of me. I nearly lost my company because of Gideon Vale, not because of you. It doesn't matter. The result is the same. He uses me to get to you. If you leave, he wins, Vivian said, and he knows it. That's exactly why he's doing this. Vivian placed the resignation letter on the desk. Then she put the Mont Blanc pen on top of it. They made you believe you were the problem before. They made you believe everything that happened was your fault, that you deserved what they did to you. Vivian's voice remained steady, but her eyes were wet. Are you going to let them make you believe it again? Nia looked at the pen. Then she looked at Vivian, this silver-haired woman who, somehow, still had enough courage left to keep fighting. Your mother gave you this pen because she believed you would use it for something meaningful, Vivian said, not to disappear when someone tried to frighten you. Nia picked up the resignation letter with both hands and tore it in half. Good, Vivian said, because something arrived that changes everything. She opened a drawer and removed a flash drive. Darius was contacted by a former Vale legal paralegal named Mara Jensen. She worked close to Gideon for years. She says she has internal emails and direct communications proving that Gideon personally ordered the evidence in your disciplinary case to be fabricated. Nia gripped the edge of the desk. She has the original emails, metadata, server logs, file history, everything the disciplinary board refused to examine when you asked them to. Nia sat down slowly. Why now? Why is she coming forward now? Because she saw the news. She saw what they're doing to you, Vivian said, and she told Darius he did it to her. He'll do it to anyone. I can't watch it happen again. Nia closed her eyes. For years, she had believed she was alone. She believed no one inside Gideon Vale's machine had seen what happened. She believed no one had cared. Someone had seen. Someone had cared. Someone had kept the evidence. Nia opened her eyes. When can we meet her? Soon. Nia picked up her mother's pen and slipped it back into her pocket. When the hearing began, the courtroom was packed. The story of the cleaning woman challenging a billion-dollar law firm had escaped the business pages and become national conversation. Reporters filled the back row. Camera crews gathered outside. Online accounts that had mocked Nia were now following every development. Nia entered wearing a grey blazer and white blouse. She wore no jewelry. The Mont Blanc pen was clipped neatly to her pocket. Darius walked beside her, carrying boxes of documents. Gideon Vale arrived with a large legal team, though some of the lawyers who had once surrounded him were gone. A few had quietly withdrawn. No public statement, no explanation, just empty chairs. Gideon didn't look at Nia. He took his place at the defense table adjusted his cufflinks, and opened his briefcase with the calm routine of a man pretending this was ordinary business. The judge entered. The Honorable Celeste Warren had spent decades on the bench. She studied both tables over the top of her glasses before speaking. "Let's begin." Vale's lead counsel went first. The argument was polished, rehearsed, and delivered with the confidence of people accustomed to winning. Nia Holloway was described as a disgraced former attorney with a personal vendetta. The defense claimed she had manipulated an elderly businesswoman and invented allegations about a legitimate merger. Her old disciplinary ruling was presented as proof that dishonesty was part of her character. She was not a whistleblower, they argued. She was a fraud who had found another victim. Darius allowed them to finish. I didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to object. He sat with his hands folded and waited. Then he stood. "Your Honor, the defense has described my client as a fraud. They've relied on the disciplinary ruling against her as proof of who she is. We would like to show the court how that ruling was manufactured." Darius called Mara Jensen to the witness stand. Mara walked forward like someone stepping into a fire she had spent years circling. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steady. "I was a paralegal at Vale Legal. I reported directly to Gideon Vale's office." "Ms. Jensen, can you describe what happened after Nia Holloway filed an internal report at Prescott and Rowe concerning suspicious trust account transfers?" Mara took a breath. "Mr. Vale called an emergency meeting with senior staff. He told us a junior associate at Prescott and Rowe had discovered the transfers. Then he told us to make the Holloway problem disappear." The courtroom shifted. Reporters leaned forward. "What happened next?" "We were told to create a counter-narrative. Billing records were modified. Correspondence was backdated. Sworn statements were prepared for people who were told what to write and where to sign. I personally formatted documents under Mr. Vale's direct instruction." Gideon's lead counsel jumped to his feet. "Objection. This testimony is uncorroborated." "It is corroborated," Darius said, and held up the flash drive. "These are internal emails from Vale Legal's own servers, preserved by Ms. Jensen before she left the firm. The metadata is intact. The server records have been independently reviewed. The instructions, edits, revisions, and distribution history all trace back through accounts tied to Mr. Vale and his senior team." Judge Warren reviewed the supporting documentation in silence. Pages turned. Nobody else in the room moved. "I'll allow it." Gideon's face didn't change, but the hand resting on the table slowly closed into a fist until his knuckles lost their color. Darius continued. A comparison appeared on the courtroom screen. On one side were clauses from the Hartwell and Sterling merger contract. On the other were matching structures from several other Vale Legal mergers, stretching across years. Same shell company architecture, same hidden transfer methods, same linguistic patterns, buried in the same types of subsections. "This is not one questionable deal, Your Honor," Darius said. "This is a system, a pattern of fraud spanning years and multiple corporate acquisitions. The same playbook used again and again, hidden beneath the same kind of legal language." One of Gideon's remaining lawyers leaned toward another and whispered something. Then he quietly closed his briefcase without looking at Gideon. Another lawyer did the same. Darius turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to call one more witness, Nia Holloway." Nita stood and walked to the witness box. She placed both hands flat against the wood. She carried no notes. She didn't need them. "Miss Holloway," Darius said, "in your own words, tell the court what happened." Nia looked across the courtroom, at the reporters, at the cameras, at Gideon Vale, who stared down at the table in front of him. "I found $12 million hidden through shell companies connected to that man," she said. "I reported it. I followed the rules. I followed the procedures. I did what an ethical attorney is supposed to do." Her voice stayed steady. "In return, evidence was fabricated against me. My license was taken. Firms stopped returning my calls. I couldn't work in the profession I had spent my life preparing for." She drew a slow breath. "When my mother became sick, I couldn't afford the treatment I wanted to give her. She spent her life cleaning hotel rooms so I could become a lawyer. She gave me a pen when I passed the bar and told me to use it for something important." The courtroom became completely still. "I didn't come here for revenge," Nia continued. "I came here because silence is how people like Gideon Vale keep winning. They depend on people like me, staying quiet, staying invisible, keeping our heads down and accepting whatever story they tell about us. She looked at Judge Warren. I stayed silent for a long time. I watched my mother die. I cleaned conference rooms where people made deals I could have negotiated myself, and I said nothing because I had started to believe what they said about me. Her eyes stayed steady. But the law shouldn't care what uniform you wear. The truth is still the truth, whether it comes from a corner office or from someone pushing a cleaning cart. Nia turned toward Gideon. "Ada buried me once. You won't bury her." The courtroom stayed silent. A lawyer on Gideon's side put down his pen, pushed his chair back, stood, and walked away from the defense table. I didn't explain himself. Then another lawyer stood, then another. Gideon Vale remained seated with empty chairs spreading beside him. Judge Warren removed her glasses and spoke slowly. "The court finds sufficient evidence to refer this matter for criminal investigation into Gideon Vale and Vale Legal. The firm's assets are to be frozen, pending that investigation. The Hartwell and Sterling merger agreement is void. The disciplinary proceedings involving Nia Holloway will be reopened for a complete review of the evidence presented here." She looked directly at Gideon. "Mr. Vale, I strongly suggest that you retain personal counsel. You are going to need it." Gideon sat alone at a table designed for a full legal team. His briefcase was still open. His cufflinks still shone beneath the courtroom lights. But the empire he had built on silence, fear, and the belief that nobody would ever challenge him was beginning to collapse around him. Nia walked out of this courtroom with the Mont Blanc pen in her pocket and her head held high. After the disciplinary board reviewed Mara Jensen's emails, the forensic analysis, the metadata, and the larger pattern of fabrication connected to Vale Legal, the decision was unanimous. Nia Holloway was reinstated as a licensed attorney in the state of New York. She signed the reinstatement papers with her mother's Mont Blanc pen. Her hand shook. She let it shake. She didn't try to hide it. Darius Bennett sat among the people watching and clapped longer than anyone. Vivian Hartwell sat near the front. She didn't clap for long. She simply smiled, the quiet, knowing smile of someone who had waited years to see the truth finally recognized. The consequences for Gideon Vale came quickly after that. I was indicted on multiple counts involving wire fraud, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. His bail was set at $12 million, the same amount Nia had originally traced through the trust accounts. The judge didn't comment on the coincidence. There was no need. Vale Legal was dissolved. The firm that had intimidated businesses and professionals for years closed its doors. Several lawyers who had once sat beside Gideon began cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for reduced charges. Others were indicted with him. The offices emptied. Someone had left a briefcase in the lobby. Nobody came back for it. Mara Jensen received whistleblower protection and a settlement from the dissolution fund. Nia hired her as the first member of a new legal team at Hartwell and Sterling. When Mara received the offer letter, she cried. Nia pretended not to notice. She simply slid a box of tissues across the desk without saying anything. Darius Bennett opened his own practice in Brooklyn, focusing on civil rights and corporate accountability. Nia began sending him referrals almost immediately. He called her. "You don't have to keep sending me clients, Nia." "I'm not sending you clients," she said. "I'm sending you fights worth having." Vivian Hartwell appointed Nia General Counsel of Hartwell and Sterling. Nia moved into a corner office on the executive floor, only a few steps from the boardroom where she had once emptied trash cans while everyone else slept. She kept the office simple. A laptop, a legal pad, a framed photograph of Dorothy Holloway on the day Nia graduated from law school. Dorothy was wearing her hotel uniform. Because she had come straight from work, she was smiling so broadly that her eyes were nearly closed. Beside the photograph sat the Mont Blanc pen. Vivian later hosted a private ceremony in the Hartwell and Sterling lobby. Board members, employees, and a small group of journalists gathered as a brass plaque was unveiled on the wall. It announced the Dorothy Holloway Foundation, created for students who had been told they couldn't succeed and kept going anyway. The foundation offered full scholarships to black law students from working-class families, tuition, books, bar preparation, mentorship. The support would continue every year, funded by Hartwell and Sterling and administered personally by Nia. Nia stood at the podium with a prepared speech in her hand, several pages, carefully written, professional. She folded it and slipped it into her pocket. My mother cleaned hotel rooms for most of her life, Nia said. She rarely missed a shift. She didn't believe cleaning was all she was worth. She believed it was what she was willing to do so someone she loved could have a chance to become something more. Nia looked out at the room. This foundation isn't about me. It's about every kid sitting in a library with borrowed books, wondering whether anyone will ever give them a chance. I want them to know someone will. She stepped away from the podium. Vivian squeezed her hand. Neither woman said anything. Neither needed to. Later, after the building had grown quiet, Nia sat alone in her office with the city glowing far below the windows. A soft knock came from the open doorway. Nia looked up. A young woman in a grey cleaning uniform stood in the hall holding a trash bag. Sorry, she said. I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back. No, come in. Nia stood. What's your name? The woman hesitated. Nobody on that floor had ever asked her before. Keisha. I'm Nia. Nia held out her hand. If you ever need anything at all, my door is open. Keisha shook her hand slowly. She looked surprised, grateful, and unsure what to make of a general counsel who stopped to learn the name of someone from the cleaning staff. Nia watched her leave. Then she sat down, picked up her mother's pen, and placed it beside Dorothy's photograph. The city lights reflected in the glass. Far below, the loading dock, where Nia once began each cleaning shift, sat quiet in the darkness. She didn't look down. Some people build legacies from corner offices. Nia Holloway built hers from a cleaning cart, one truth at a time. And maybe that's what makes her story worth remembering. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a person walking into a room where everyone has already decided she doesn't belong, then speaking calmly because the truth still matters. Strength isn't always winning the first fight. Sometimes it's surviving what happened, carrying the pain without letting it turn you cruel, and choosing to stand up again when someone else is about to be hurt in the same way. Nia couldn't change the years she lost. She couldn't bring her mother back. She couldn't erase the humiliation, the fear, or the moments when she nearly believed the lies told about her. But she could decide what those experiences would become. She could use them to protect someone else. She could open a door that had once been closed to her. She could learn the name of the person everyone else ignored. Vivian made a choice too. She could have dismissed a cleaning application the way many others had. Instead, she looked closer. Darius could have protected his career and walked away. He stayed. Mara could have kept the evidence hidden forever. She chose responsibility over silence. None of them fixed everything alone. The truth came forward because several people, each carrying their own fear, decided that doing the right thing mattered more than staying comfortable. That doesn't mean every wound disappears when justice finally arrives. Some losses remain. Forgiveness doesn't require pretending harm never happened. And kindness doesn't mean allowing people to avoid responsibility. It means refusing to let another person's choices decide what kind of person you will become. Sometimes the most meaningful second chance isn't returning to the life you had before. It's building a life with more compassion, more courage, and a clearer understanding of who deserves to be seen. It's using what you survived to make the road a little easier for the person coming behind you. If this story stayed with you, ask yourself one simple question. When you meet someone the world has overlooked, do you see only the uniform they're wearing, or do you take the time to see the person inside it? A title can disappear. A position can be taken away. A reputation can be damaged by people with more power and louder voices. But character is built in the choices nobody can make for you. The choice to tell the truth, the choice to take responsibility, the choice to stand beside someone who needs support, the choice to remain kind without becoming weak. If this story made you feel something, share what you would have done in Nia's place. Pass it along to someone who may need the reminder today. And if you want more stories about courage, dignity, accountability, and second chances, subscribe and stay with us. Because the truth doesn't care about your title or your uniform. And sometimes real power begins the moment one person decides that silence is no longer the answer.